Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. We have an updated forecast through the end of November, but I do want to start out with the short term, the next 2 weeks here, because we've continued to see colder trends with the upcoming front as we work into the weekend, and especially early next week. It's really only a 3-day period or so with temperatures that will be much below normal. The rest of the next 15 days, for the most part, going to be rather mild for much of the country, but just enough of the cold influence late in the week 1 time frame and to start out week 2 that you can see the week 1 map, cooler than normal across the eastern part of the country, warmer than normal west, still below normal in terms of heating demand because of the well above normal temperatures across the western half of the United States. As we go into the week 2 period, again, probably starting out on a cooler note in the eastern part of the United States. I do think more seasonable to slightly cooler conditions can linger on the East Coast with another couple of fronts as we roll throughout the week 2 time frame, but that warmth will have the tendency to spread back eastward as we go further into this time frame, and that's because of the tropical forcing influence that we are going to see dominate this pattern over the next several weeks. Taking a look here at the HDD forecast, our heating demand forecast. If you're not familiar, this is gas-weighted heating degree days. It gives an idea of how much energy demand is being used to heat households across the United States. And if we zoom in here, you can see, again, these dashed lines are the normal 10 and the 30-year normal values. For the most part, over the next 2 weeks, we are below normal. But we have a notable spike here for 3 days or so as we get into early next week. And that ultimately is what's really driving a lot of the forecast as we close out week 1 and get into the week 2 time frame. And we can visualize this here with our temperature maps as well. So in the short term, again, you can see temperatures warmer than normal for much of the country. We start to see a weak front work in as we work into Friday. That will cool things down in the northeastern part of the country, but you can see we warm up again as we work into Saturday, but you can see the colder air building to the north, and this is the powerful front. It's just trended stronger and stronger and stronger as we have gotten closer. I do think that is something to keep in mind as we move forward, is that model data in the extended range may not see the intensity of these fronts very well. We have a lot of high latitude blocking that allows for colder air to naturally seep a little bit further south throughout the mid latitudes. Do I think we have another front of this intensity in the week 2 time frame? I don't right now, but I would not be shocked if the fronts and the storms we do see pack a little bit more of a punch than currently modeled. So this is day 7 into day 8. You can see the intensity of the colder than normal air for a couple of days, much below normal temperatures, Ohio Valley, southeast United States, mid-Atlantic, and into the northeast. But you can start to see as we go throughout next week, the warmth begin to creep back in from west to east, and we quickly warm back up above normal, especially if you're in the central part of the country. Again, as we noted, some of the cooler air may have the tendency to linger on the east coast, but out ahead of another storm, the 13th to the 15th, you can really see this warmth spread a little bit further to the east. Again, would not be shocked if model data is a little bit too warm in the extended range, probably underdone with the influence of our storms and our fronts a bit, but I do think the tendency will be more on the mild side as we go through the midway point of the month. Now, with these cold fronts in the short term, I do want to briefly touch on the potential for the season's first snow risk as we go throughout the weekend and into early next week. So let's start here. This is as we work into Thursday and into Thursday night. This is by Friday morning, guys. You can see our first front sweeping through, bringing some precipitation opportunities through the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley. Could be a couple of stronger storms late Friday down through the lower Ohio Valley. And then it's as we work into the weekend, guys. This is as we work into Saturday evening. What you will note, data trying to put down some snow Saturday night here across parts of Michigan. Data still kind of all over the place in terms of the intensity of any snowfall potential. You can see the GFS here. This is a 0Z run. Here was the 6Z run. It's a little bit more aggressive with accumulating snow in parts of Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin into Michigan. It's something to keep an eye on for sure, guys, as we work into next this upcoming Saturday and into Sunday. And I do think regardless, if we go back to the European model, as we work into Sunday, we will need to be watching for lake effect potential, Lake Michigan, western parts of Michigan, and probably into the northeastern United States as well after this moves through, because of how much cold air will be moving down. So very likely to see the first accumulating snow of the season from a lake effect perspective. We'll need to watch for the Midwest to see some kind of snow risk as we work into late Saturday as well. Beyond that system, we get drier. I think that there's a decent little gap here in our more notable storm dates, especially if you're in the central part of the country. It's going to be a less active stretch as we get into next week. You can kind of see the lake effect influence here in the Great Lakes as we go into next week. That is going to be short-lived, though, because as we spread that warmth further to the east, look at what starts to happen. The pattern gets very, very active here between the 14th and the 18th of the month. We have numerous storm systems that we are tracking through the middle to latter part of November. I really think the back half of November is going to be very active, likely in terms of rain at first, and then transitioning to winter storm threats as we get into the last week of the month or so towards Thanksgiving. And again, this is all being driven by our tropical forcing. We're in MJO phase 5 right now, guys. That's aiding in the colder trend that we've seen with this upcoming front in the short term, but still looking to move into MJO phase 6, 7, and eventually phase 8 as we go throughout the rest of the month. The timing of this is going to be really critical because phases 6 and 7 generally are warmer. Phase 8 is when you get that colder air to try to work back into the eastern part of the country. And so that is what we are going to dive into as we go throughout the weeks 3 and 4 forecast. Let's start here with MJO phases 6 and 7 and what they traditionally look like. Now, one thing I want to note that I feel pretty confident on regardless of the timing of the MJO. As we get into phase 6 and 7, it favors high latitude blocking. It favors higher pressure over Greenland. What we need to watch is the Pacific. This is the part to keep an eye on. It's as we go from 6 to 7 into 8 when the Pacific starts to change and that colder air can eject further south into the east across the United States. And so 6 and 7, you can see favors warmth across the eastern part of the country. If we take a look at the EPS here, it's even a little bit more cool in the western part of the country than that analog. Regardless, it's a warm signal in the eastern part of the United States as we get into the extended range. Maybe the northeast stays a little bit more seasonable thanks to this big high pressure to the north. But, if you're in this area in here, that is a pretty warm signal mid to late week 2 through the 19th or 20th of the month. And you can really see that here. Again, I think this is probably a little bit too warm, but the idea for the most part is mild through the end of week 2. As we get into MJO phase 8, this is when you get the Pacific to shift, you get warmth and higher pressure to develop up here near Alaska, you continue with the blocking over the Arctic and over the Atlantic, and you get much more widespread colder risks to dive down towards the United States. And so if we look back here at our MJO forecast, the idea would be the last week of the month or so for this to start to happen. Again, I think that the main uncertainty right now is it the last week of November? Does it delay a little bit more than that? There's differences in the model guidance right now in terms of the timing. Based off what I see right now in the upper level patterns, in our tropical forcing signals, I think it kicks off with the 23rd to the 25th storm system. I think there's a big storm system in there right before Thanksgiving, and then by the time we work towards Thanksgiving, the pattern is colder than normal. I do think regardless, this high latitude blocking, or what we call a negative NAO, high pressure over Greenland, that sticks around. That stays pretty negative as we go throughout most of November, and that's not been relatively common as of late. In fact, if we go back to La Nina Novembers with a negative NAO, there's really only been 4 years in the past 25 years, and you roll those years into December, and this does support the idea of the colder flip happening. It supports a lot of high latitude blocking. When you see all these oranges and reds here over the Arctic, over Alaska, over Greenland, that is a colder signal for the United States. And we also have support from the North Pacific. If we look at the North Pacific through the 24th of the month, as we discussed, it's warm east, cooler west, but then look at what happens. That cooler air towards the end of the month comes eastward. It's a more widespread, colder than normal risk as we close out November. So we've got multiple different pattern drivers that favor this idea, and we also have data support. If we take a look at the EPS weekly, you can see the warmth east, cooler air to the west between the 14th and the 20th of the month. Watch the transition happen. There's likely a big storm in here the 23rd to the 25th, and by the week 4 time frame, by the last week of November, first couple of days of December, your warmth starts to shift west and to the north, and you get cooler air in the eastern part of the country. Let's look at that from a temperature perspective. This is between the 18th and the 24th. You can see warmer air east, cooler air west. Watch as that bleeds eastward with time. And then by the last several days of November and the start of December, you have cooler air across the eastern part of the country. I don't have any reason right now to disagree with this idea from the EPS Weekly. I think the stage is set for a colder into December or November and start to December. I would not be shocked if in some cases, I would say maybe especially into December, if there could be some notable cold air. In fact, if you go out a little bit further, you can see that builds in on the EPS Weekly through the middle part of December. And so with that in mind, here's our outlook. Week 3 is probably warmer. I do think that's something to keep in mind. In the eastern part of the country, week 3 is probably warmer. If you're on the immediate East Coast, you probably stay a little bit more seasonable. But the week 4 time frame, the last 6 days of November, the start of December, I do think that colder air will be bleeding in across the eastern part of the country in this area in here. We tried to blend the ideas together the best that we could. As this transition happens, I think it's a very active time frame. We've got numerous storm systems the last 2 weeks of November. I think that week 3, probably a lot of rain systems in here. As we get into the week 4 time frame, we'll need to be watching for winter storm potential, I would say especially in this region in here. So something to keep in mind heading towards Thanksgiving. One last thing before we go. Risk that we need to watch. I mentioned the timing of our tropical forcing. If the GEFS idea would be right and we stall out here in phase 7, it would be a warmer risk to the forecast. Specifically here, our high latitude blocking is still there because MJO phase 7 favors a negative NAO, but the Pacific doesn't shift. If the Pacific doesn't shift, you generally are still going to lean a little bit more mild. And so that would be the risk that we need to keep an eye on. Again, not the favored idea right now. I still think there's a flip in the Pacific. There's a lot of different signals for it. But the risk would be that we delay the arrival of the cooler air, if anything. Taking a look at December as a whole. This is the latest CAN-SIPS model, the Canadian model. As we get into December, it is colder than normal across the northern tier of the U.S. and into the Northeast. Warmer than normal south and west. I show this because it looks very, very close to what the EPS Weekly is also showing right now. If we take a look at where it has its colder air. It is nearly an identical match to what the Canadian ensemble has into December right now for its forecast. And it also happens to match our December forecast we updated last week. In fact, matches very, very carefully. So I feel good about our December outlook right now. Both models support the idea. And if we take a look at our stratospheric analogs as we head into December, this is a combination of some of the stratospheric analogs and a weak La Nina state, also matches with this idea very well. So multiple different things talking in terms of our current December outlook. Don't think I would touch this as things stand right now. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Don't forget to sign up for our webinar where we will dive into the entire winter forecast tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. Be sure to sign up. We'll send you a copy of the recording at bamwx.com/webinar. Hope to see you there. Appreciate you all. Chat soon.